My name is Tom Ewing, and I'm with RTI International's Forensic Technology Center of Excellence. For today's webinar, we have Dr. Heather Egger from the Office of the Medical Investigator at the University of New Mexico giving her presentation titled Overview and Accessing the MDID Database and Searching. Thank you, Dr. Egger, for taking the time to provide this presentation, and we'll go ahead and get started now.
Hi, thanks for joining me. I'm going to present you with an overview of accessing and searching the New Mexico Decedent Image Database. My name's Heather Edgar, and I'm the PI on this project. Here's a little overview of this presentation. I'm going to give you a brief introduction about myself and then about the Office of the Medical Investigator, where all the data in NMDID comes from, a little history of the project, and then some project challenges that we faced, and some ethical considerations that we had in mind throughout the work of our project. After that, I'll give you a tour of the website, and I'll give you some instructions on how to use the search engine, how to download and very simply use metadata, and then also how to submit a request for images from our CT database. Now, this is the first of 4 presentations. And in future presentations, you'll get a lot more detail about how to actually use NMDID. In the second presentation, you'll learn how to utilize metadata for complex analyses using Access database systems. And Dr. Shamsi Daneshvari-Berry, who's the informatics specialist on the project, will be presenting that. She's at Western Michigan Homer Stryker Medical School. And in the third presentation, you'll learn how to download, view, and analyze 2D images using Radiant. And that presentation will come from Dr. Natalie Adolfi, who's the head of the Center for Forensic Imaging here at the Office of the Medical Investigator. And then in the final presentation, you'll learn how to view and analyze 3D images using 3D Slicer. And that presentation will be made by Dr. Rachel Menegas, who's at the University of North Texas Health Sciences Center. So a little bit about me and why I'm doing this presentation. I'm an associate professor of anthropology at University of New Mexico, and my research in the anthropology department is on biocultural aspects in historical populations, and that has a lot of forensic applications. And through that line of research, I over time became the forensic anthropologist for the state of New Mexico. But before I did that work, I was the curator of human osteology for the Maxwell Museum, and so I developed some skills that are related to collections development and management. And if you're curious to see other projects that I've done before, just Google Maxwell Orthodontics Case File System, and that will provide you with a database that's kind of like NMDID, but a lot simpler. It contains orthodontic records, including x-rays on 6,000 individuals. So if you're interested in facial growth and development or orthodontics, that's a really good resource available to you. So as I mentioned, I work at the Office of the Medical Investigator. It's the only state-centralized, academically based medical examiner's office in the United States. So it's based at the Health Sciences Center at the University of New Mexico, and it serves the entire state of New Mexico. We don't have a coroner system, and our medical examiner system is not county by county or even region by region. It's one office serving the entire state. The Office of the Medical Investigator has a long history in research and teaching, and currently has trained about 18% of all the forensic pathologists in the United States. If you look at residencies, fellowships, and all that stuff, 18% of all the forensic pathologists have passed through the Office of the Medical Investigator. The OMI moved into a new facility in 2010. We still think of it as the new building, even though it's 10 years old now. And when that building opened, it came with some equipment and some resources available for research and for casework that was really cutting edge at the time. And that included computed tomography, magnetic resonance, and only really important probably to me, but dedicated anthropology labs. So a little bit about the history of this project and how we came to achieve having this database. In 2010, University of New Mexico was awarded a grant by the NIJ with the principal investigator, Dr. Kurt Nolte, and that funded the scanning of about 6,000 images, the first 6,000 images that were collected using the CT scan. Just because you have the scanner, that's about $1 million, but you also need somebody to run it and ways to store it, and there's expenses related to that. So that grant was focused on the use of CT in several causes of death. Those would be gunshot wounds, sharp force trauma, and shaken baby cases, to look at the extent to which CTs could add new information to the investigation of those cases. But because techs were hired to scan those cases, what actually ended up happening is that they quickly realized how useful CT scans were in medical legal investigation. And so they actually ended up scanning about 85% of all the cases while that grant was in force. So in about 2011, just shortly after scanning was starting to be done, a small group of researchers, including myself, began discussing creating a public resource from the data that was going to be developed. We knew what kinds of information was available in medical legal investigations, and we realized that these whole body CT scans, I neglected to mention that these are whole body CT scans, but that was going to very quickly create an uncomparable resource, and that if we could make that information available for research, we could really speed the process and the timing with which research that draws in human anatomical data could be conducted. In 2014, Dr. Barish created a Master's of Clinical Research project that determined the metadata for NMDID. She consulted with more than 50 researchers in a variety of different fields, all the fields that we could imagine might use such data. So it included forensic anthropologists and pathologists, but also people who study human evolution, and a wide variety of safety people and investigators and other people like that. And she consulted them to find out what kind of shared body of data they felt they needed to make the research valuable for them. And we came up with a list of metadata that they all kind of agreed was the minimum set that was necessary. And then, to be honest, there was a set of data outside of that that I wanted for my own research, and so we added that in, and that's available in the database too. And then in 2016, NIJ very kindly funded us again to create the New Mexico Decedent Image Database. And that funded the creation of the database and the website development so that we could share it with the research public. We worked very hard from 2016 to 2020, and the database and website became available on February 18th, 2020. And to date, today in September, there are 280 users approximately, it might be more than that by now, who have made requests for data from the database. We've approved 75 image requests, and 36 countries are represented, although earlier today I think I approved somebody from a 37th country. So I love the global scale of this project. Now, let me talk to you a little bit about some project challenges that we faced. One of the first major problems that we would have to deal with if this database was going to become a reality was de-identifying and anonymizing DICOM images. So de-identifying is the process of stripping information out of data that could identify an individual. And anonymizing is the assignment of a code that links all the pieces of data related to one person, but without identifying that person. So DICOM images, which each slice of these CTs are made of, each CT contains about 10,000 on average DICOM slices. DICOM images. DICOM, in its format, has embedded information that identifies individuals. And so for the 15,243 individuals in the database that has on average 10,000 slices, each one of those images had to have information de-identified and then anonymized so that we could link everything together. So that's a challenge. And our solution was that we went to the UNM Center for Advanced Research Computing, and it took them quite a lot of work, but they were able to develop a program that could download the CT from the proprietary software that it existed in, strip out all the information that was identifying in it, reassign new anonymized information to it, conserve it, and take it from the PACS format it was in to a DICOM format, and assemble it into a little pack so that we could use that stuff, those images, and share them with you. Next project challenge we had is 15,000 individuals with 10,000 images apiece, plus all the metadata. That's a lot of data. We weren't even exactly sure how much data it was going to be because it had to deal with, we didn't know exactly how much we were going to be able to compress it and still be able to provide really high quality images. And we ended up with a little more than 50 terabytes of data. And that's a lot of data to move around. It's a lot of data to share with other people and to keep safe as well. And again, the University of New Mexico Center for Advanced Research Computing provided the solutions because they're not even like impressed with 50 terabytes of data. They're like, yeah, all right, we can handle that. That's fine. All right, the next thing we did was attempt to call all next of kin for decedents. There's information that we really wanted to have about decedents that was not regularly included in investigation reports. And so we set out to call all next of kin. We didn't succeed in calling all next of kin, but we did reach out and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but we were able to get information from very, very dense information from about 1,800 people, and slightly less dense but still very good information from about 10,000 people. So the solution for this problem came from a graduate student assistant assigned to the project and several UNM student employees who had the amazing task of calling next of kin and asking them questions about their family member who had died. And you can imagine the kinds of experiences that they had doing that process. Then our next challenge was to take all this and put it in a way that was user-friendly, natural to access, in a web-based interface that was going to include a whole lot of searchable fields, but not be overwhelming for the user. And the solution there came from the University of New Mexico Arts and Sciences IT department and just a couple of guys who built our database and built our website. I want to address some ethical considerations that came up during the project, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to do so because I get asked a lot of questions about what we did with NMDID and how we were able to do this and what ethical considerations we faced. Before we were applying for funding, we developed a research protocol to approach the University of New Mexico IRB for the ability to provide images and for calling next of kin. We found out some interesting things along the way. The first thing we found was that the New Mexico Attorney General has determined that decedents are not human subjects. So therefore, in fact, decedent data is requestable through FOIA requests, which means, in fact, autopsy reports or anything like that are actually public records, and because of that, we did not need to apply for IRB information or an IRB approval for any parts of the development of the database that concerned the decedents. Now, that is a different story from the actual next of kin who we called. So when we applied to our institutional review board, they determined, in fact, that while we're calling next of kin and while we did call them and ask information from them, they were not the subjects of the research. And that's the truth. There's no information about next of kin in the database, and there's no research that will be done concerning the next of kin. They're not the subjects of research, and therefore no human subjects research for approval was required to develop this database. And also, there is no requirement from our institution, from the University of New Mexico, that is required for any user to use the data or the images. However, we had developed that research protocol that was really very, very specific about privacy and limiting harm. And so we, throughout the development of the project, followed the specifications of that research protocol that we had provided to the IRB, despite the fact that we were not required to. That research protocol is available on the website. You can see the entirety of it. And our goals in writing it were to protect decedent's privacy, to protect next of kin privacy, as I said, to limit harm. So one of the things that's in there is information about grief counseling and other things that were available to both our student assistants and to next of kin. We also have a data use agreement that places limitations on how images can be used. Our informatics specialist has determined that using NMDID does not violate overall EU General Data Protections regulations. Now, that's our perspective on it. If you are an EU user, you might consider consulting with your own institution on that. But our reading of the GDPR is that there is no violation of NMDID NMD does not violate the GDPR in any way. The country of Denmark has put on some additional concerns that use of NMDID would violate. Your institution may place additional requirements on your use of NMDID, but you are not required to go through IRB for the UNM in addition to any others. Okay, I'm going to provide you with a tour of the website now. So when you first log on to the NMDID website, you'll see it here, nmdid.unm.edu. This is the home page for that page, for the website. You'll see here this 150 million images. That's that approximately 15,243 individuals times approximately 10,000 images per person. That's included, over 50 terabytes of CT data, and associated with up to 69 associated data fields per CT. That's that metadata that Dr. Berry had originally determined we need, plus the other stuff that I wanted. All cases that have data could be automatically gathered from, all cases are associated with any data that could be automatically gathered using querying tools from medical legal investigation records. In addition, we kind of virtually put our hands on 2/3 of those cases, about 10,000 cases, going through with a human actually reading all the investigation records and recording all additional information to fill in those 69 variables. And then finally, of that 2/3 of cases, more than 18% include information that came from actual conversations with next of kin. If we just scan down the slide, you'll see that there's a video here that's kind of an introduction, but I have to admit that it's a little bit redundant with what you're watching right now, and some basic instructions on how to use the database. And finally, down here at the bottom, this is a list of all those variables that are present in the database. So you can see that there's a lot under the census category, basics about a person, quite a few about their health prior to their death, and then a set of information about their circumstances of death. All right, I'm going to skip now to the How to Use page. And the first thing you'll see here at the top is how to request access. You simply click here. But before I do, I'm going to give you it gives you the full instructions to request access, how you search the metadata in very brief summary, select records, how to view your selections, request images. So if you forget this stuff, if you're in the database, kind of in the thick of things doing some, you can just read through this. And then there's some additional videos down here, how to use metadata that you get from simple searches, and then also how to use metadata in some complex searches. And then this is kind of an interesting one. RxNorm is a database that we don't manage, and it's a coding system for medications. It's what insurance companies use and doctors use about how to code medications. We have used RxNorms rather than names of medications. And so if you are curious about somebody's medications that they've taken, what you'll get is a whole long series of numbers, and you input that information into an online database for RxNorm, and it will provide you the names and of what those medications are. So this video explains that. When you're ready to request access, simply click here and you'll find a very small form to fill out that will ask you for your name and your institution you're affiliated with and some contact information. One important piece to think about here is the email that you're going to include. We require an institutional email address. This has to be an institution for research. So it could be a university, it could be an insurance company. There's a wide variety of different institutions that would qualify, but what does not qualify is a Gmail account, a Hotmail account, a Yahoo account. None of those kinds of accounts are acceptable by our research protocol. If for whatever reason, you're in another country and you are associated with an institution of research, but you do not maintain such an email address, you can contact us and explain that, and we can determine whether to approve your request. But the only reason so far that anybody has had their request for access rejected is because they applied with a Yahoo or a Gmail or similar email address. So you simply click here, and with a username and password, and within usually almost always 24 hours, somebody will review your request and approve it if it's approvable. You will receive an email that tells you when your research request has been approved. Once your email request, once you receive that and you're ready to log back in, you can log here. I'm already logged in, but this would normally say login, and it would not say administration here because we're here logged in under my name. I want to make sure that you understand that when you request access, you will be asked to sign a data use agreement prior to being provided access. And we can find that data use agreement here under resources, and it's also under the how-to page when you click on request access. But I'll show it to you here. We worked really, really hard to make this short. This is not an Apple Computers access agreement. It is literally 1,040 words. So I request kindly that you actually read it and understand what you are agreeing to. It's not an onerous agreement, but what's important is that, first of all, you know that you shall not attempt to identify or contact any individual's family whose data is included in the database, that you shall not attempt to personally identify a participant or reconstruct a face for public viewing in a recognizable format. We understand that some research uses faces, and you can do such research. You are not restricted from that, but you cannot show a reconstruction of a face for public viewing, and that includes scientific literature. And also we ask that you share any publications that stem from this database, and that you email the citation, and that you also recognize the contributions of this database to your research. Just cite us. I'll show you the citation. Okay. So once you have requested and you're waiting your 24 hours to get access, you can check out the rest of the information that's available on the site. Here under resources, I've already pointed out the data use agreement. Also available to you is data information. So we have some videos here. Some of them are the same videos, just so that you can, basically have them in another place, easy to find. But also I want to point out to you the data dictionary. So the data dictionary is a PDF that concerns all the metadata that's available in the database, and it provides some pretty in-depth information. So again, here's the summary of all the information. It also provides you information about the standards that we use and how to read the data dictionary. And then if we just look at how variables are described, you can see here's the first variable that's described as sex. Here's the standard that we use to develop our coding system, and some very basic information, including, most importantly, probably the normative answer list. So here's the possible answers that you might have for sex. And then here we don't have, normative answer list, because this is a numerical piece of information, okay? But it is a 4-digit number. And so you can see this about any piece of information. Some of these are really extensive and long, especially when we're talking about things like health variables. So the question we asked is, does the person have a familial or a personal history of cancer? Those are 2 different questions. And if the answer is yes, these are the possible answers. We then asked, what kind of cancer did they have? And that you can see there's a wide variety of different cancers. Also in here is none and unknown as possible kinds of cancers. So if you're curious about cancer, we got some information. Gee, wow, that sure is a lot of different kinds of cancer. Okay, so we have that kind of information about a lot of different pieces of data. So anytime you have a question about what the data means, go to the data dictionary and check it out. Also available to you are a list of publications and research. Right now, that list shows just publications that are associated with the development of the data, but our expectation is that when you guys provide us citations, we will link them. So we will have eventually a very long list of publications and research that utilize NMDID. Here's the instructions on how to cite it when you make those fabulous publications. It's right here. There is a DOI that will bring you to this website. There's also some information here that, some of it is stuff I've already talked about, the history of the database and some who's who and acknowledgments. And then also there's a contact page, and there's 2 different contacts provided. One, this is kind of like a content, if you're curious about the data, where it came from, or other questions about website content, click here. And if you have a technical problem, click here, because the people who manage this don't know how to do this. Okay, so let me go ahead and pretend at this point that you've just gotten your approval, and you're going to go ahead and search the database. So we'll enter the search area, and I'll give you some basic instructions on how to do this. But first, let's take a look at what's available for you to search. So open and ready to go are demographics. These are the kinds of things that people are generally searching about. So sex, and you can see here's that normative list of variables. Gender, for those individuals who we talked to their family members or had other information, we also asked about their gender questions. These are age, in years or months, birth year in case that's what you're searching for, death year, how long somebody had been in the U.S. if they were not born in the U.S., and marital status. So those are kind of like the basic things, but there are many other items you can search by. So we can search for pregnancies and live births. That's only for females. Both pregnancies and live births are only for females. For medical history, you can say, well, I'm specifically interested in people who have scoliosis. You can search for that. If you are interested in somebody who has drug use or somebody who does not have drug use history, you can search for that. If you're interested, we had to lump these two, cancers and congenital anomalies and genetic disorders. I guess it's three things, but you can search for people who have these. And then if you know a drug you want to search for, you can use the RxNorm database to get that number and search for it here. Just put in the number right here. Location. If you want to know where the person was born, or that's important to you, a variable, you only want people in New Mexico or you only want people from outside the U.S., there you go. That's the way to do it. And a residential zip code. And for privacy reasons, you can only search for the first 3 digits. Physical characteristics include birth weight category, living weight, and cadaver weight. And I just want to point out that these come with the kind of issues and problems that all weights and heights come with. They're not necessarily, a cadaver weight is pretty accurate, but if there is decomposition, it will be lighter than you might expect. Because this is research that I'm interested in, we have quite a large set of variables associated with race, ethnicity, tribe, and we list the 23 tribes that are present in New Mexico, and ancestry and excuse me, here. There's an error here. I won't show that one. Social environment. Okay, so here are individuals who have, if you're interested in tobacco use or drinking use, we have a lot of people already who are interested in these kind of variables, even simple things like socioeconomic status as an adult or as a child. Then cause and manner of death, so primary cause, and manner categories are these larger ones, accidents, homicides, natural, other, suicides, and undetermined. But the causes of death are a much more specific list, and these are the categories that are standardized, but only for our office. You're in New Mexico, so you get plague. And you can have contributing causes as well. And then finally, there's a decomposition score. One person actually looked at all 15,000 plus individuals and scored them. Thank you very much, Catherine Haver, for doing that. As for no composition, moderate decomposition, mild, and advanced. And there's a reference for this category and what each one means in the data dictionary. And then how the individual was identified. So those are all the variables that you can search for. It's a lot. So let's go ahead and do a simple search, and then we'll do a more complex search, and I'll show you how you actually get to the data. So let's say that you're interested in all males who are adult, let's say 18 to 65, who died of gunshot wounds. That's a fairly simple search. So we would choose all males, and we would choose 18 to 65. These numbers are just here from prior searches. You'll need to input yours. And then we'll choose under cause of death, primary care, or primary cause of death, gunshot wound. And then we come back up here and submit the search. And there are 1,340 such cases in this database. We limit you to being able to get data on 500 cases at a time. And you might say, well, really what I want is people who died of gunshot wounds to the head. Why can't I search for gunshot wounds to the head? Mostly that's because that's not available in the record. But let's go ahead and take a look at how you can find all those individuals. So here's the search result page, and each individual is listed here in just like a little strip of information, and we want to know more about this first individual. So we're going to view the details. Let's find out what we know about this individual. Well, we know that they're 19 years old, and we know that they're male, which we knew from the search. Their death year is 2011. That's when they died, and here's where they died. They have some mild decomposition. Here's their length and weight at autopsy. Given that there's mild decomposition, there may be some loss here. Right, we know that the person was born in 1992. We know that their 3 code where they lived was 874. We know that they were white and not Hispanic, Latino, or Middle Eastern. We know that they were a drinker, but we don't really know how much they drank or for how long they drank. We know that they were scanned using our normal protocol, which is defined. You can find that protocol on the website, and that they were scanned 23 hours after their death. Now, in addition to this, you have some scout images. So these scouts are kind of composite x-rays made from the CT. And so we can take a look at him. And if we look at this first one, well, my goodness, this sure here looks like bits of a projectile inside of a head. So if we're interested in only individuals who died of gunshot wound, this would be a person we might want to include. And we can do the same thing. We can look at the next person down. And I'm just going to skip their information, although it sure looks like there's an awful lot of it. Wow, we know everything about this guy. They did not even have scoliosis. That's useful to know. All right, but for whatever reason, we only have CTs of legs, and so we cannot include this individual in our study. So going back up to the first person. Here we are with the first person who did have a gunshot wound to the head, and we're interested in them. And we want to request, we know we're going to want to request the images for this individual. So we simply add them into the selection, and they get placed into a cart. It's just like shopping. So they're right there. And then we would, from there, make our requests for things. But instead, I'm going to do another search that's a little more complex to show you another example. Okay, so this time I'm going to say that what I'm interested in for my research are women, and I want to know something about the amount of children, the numbers of children they had, and their body weight at death for women who had children but who were underweight when they themselves were born. And so I would search for females who were, let's say again, ages 18 to 65. And I want to know that they have had children. And so the way I'm going to do this is I'm just going to search for one child, and I'm going to, let's say, put in 15 kids, because that should catch pretty much everybody. And then we're going to go to their physical characteristics, and under birth weight, choose individuals who were small at birth. All right, let's run that search. Well, look, here's a smaller amount, right, because we have a lot of variables that we're searching for. Let's take a look at those results. All right, let's check out the first individual. She was female, as we know, and 46 years old, and she died of thermal injuries. I don't think that's going to work for this research that I'm imagining here, because I need a body that's entirely intact. So I'll just skip this person and go down to the second person, who was a 42-year-old female who died of pneumonia, view those details. And we can see that she died of pneumonia. It's a natural death, and she also had some contributing causes as well, hypertension, and then that she died here in Albuquerque in 2012, and how tall she was and how much she weighed. We can see we've talked to our family member because they gave us an estimate of how tall she was and how much she weighed while she was alive. We know that she was born in Fairfield, California in 1970 and that she was of small birth weight. And this is information that came from a next of kin. We know that all her parents and grandparents were born in the United States, that she herself was Hispanic, she also, this is a subset of information that concerns categories of people in New Mexico, how they categorize themselves. And so here you might see the word Hispanic, but you also might see the word Latino or Nuevo Mexicano or Mexican American. So again, we know a lot that she didn't have any congenital abnormalities. She didn't have any genetic disorders, although there's one in her family, at least somewhere, that she had somebody in her family had lung cancer, and that she had smoked for 24 years and I guess used other oral tobacco products. She was a heavy tobacco user. She had gone to college, but she didn't have a degree. So obviously, we have a lot of information about this individual. We know, interestingly, she had some facial trauma, and she probably had plastic surgery to repair it. She had a diagnosis of mental illness and another of hypertension, and was on 3 drugs at the time of her death that we know about. Here's her CTs. So this is a case that we might be able to use for our research. I'm just going to quick look at the next person. She also was somebody who died of pneumonia. And we can learn basically the same things about her. She had 4 live births. Her mother's side of the family appears to not be from the U.S. While her father's father was from the U.S., her mother's father was born in Mexico. I just want to reiterate that while we have this much information about this person, we do not have this information about everyone. So please don't be terribly disappointed. Here's the drug she was on when you do your own search. And here's her CT. Again, these are scout images, so they are reconstructed X-rays based on the CTs. So here's 2 individuals that we might use for this particular research project. And so I'm going to go ahead and add that person and add this person. Okay, so now we should have 3 individuals in our cart that we are interested in considering. Let's go to the cart and take a look. So here's our 3 individuals from our first study, the man who died of a gunshot wound, and here are these 2 women who have children who died of pneumonia. All right, so when you want to learn more about these people, the best way to start doing that is by downloading their metadata. And you can get that without any further research requests. So let's see what you get if you open up that data. What you get is a series of Excel files, and I'm just going to give you a simple demonstration of what these look like because Dr. Berry will provide you with a very detailed set of information about how to use this data. But if we take a look just real fast at, let's try this one. Okay, so here's our 3 individuals. These are their de-identified numbers. Here's their race, ethnicity, and tribal information, and none of them are Native American, so they do not have tribal information. Let's try one other thing. Since we know there's some medications, let's take a look at that. So here's these de-identified individuals, and we can see that this individual, which we know is the male, does not have any drugs associated with him. But all of these fields relate to one decedent. So this decedent here was medicated by all of these drugs, whereas this decedent was medicated via these drugs. Dr. Berry will show you how to link these Excel files in a database so that you can do more complex querying of the information. Okay, so that's how you get the metadata. That's how you do some simple searching of information about them. Now, let's say that you would really like to request images you really want to get the CTs for all of these people. Here's where you do that. We request that you describe in detail the research that you're going to use these images for. You need to describe your inclusion and exclusion criteria, the research plan that you want to conduct, what specific hypotheses you have. If you have some ideas about what results you expect, please put them here. And if you have some ideas about benefits that might accrue, if you're doing applied research, please put in this information. And we ask that you limit this to 750 words so it won't take you very long to write. And if you can, we request that you include the number of individuals for whom you are requesting scans. Once you put that information in here, you just copy and paste it. You hit submit. It goes to a team of that represents the developers of this database, and it's reviewed by at least 2 people who then will approve or disapprove. But really, when we disapprove, what we usually do is write people and say, look, we need some additional information, or could you tell us something more about it, or modify what you're doing because it does not meet the scope of what we're looking at. We really, really want to approve research, so we'll work with you so that if it's at all possible to approve your research, we can do so. So that's the tour of the slide of the NMDID, and I hope that you find it useful and easy to use. That's a really important piece of information for me. If you have feedback about the database, please submit it to us via email. We'd really love to hear what you think. And we're interested to hear what more you'd love to have, but I'm not promising we're going to add it really soon. Just because you tell us doesn't mean you're going to get it. So I'd like to just take a moment and acknowledge the fact that this is a giant project that many, many people worked on. As I've mentioned, the funding for this project came from the National Institute of Justice, and I really appreciate their foresight in understanding that this information should be made available free to the research public. I want to thank the other presenters in this webinar series, the UNM Center for Advanced Research Computing, who made this project possible as well, UNM Arts and Sciences IT, and also UNM IT, the Office of the Vice President for Research, who gave us Grace Faustino as a project manager, even though we hadn't known we were going to need such a person, the Departments of Anthropology and OMI and their administration, the students who called all those next of kin. I guess I didn't put it on here, but I'd like to thank those next of kin as well. That's an amazing thing to let us call up and ask invasive questions about your family member to help guide research in the future. And also the Center for Forensic Imaging at the Office of the Medical Investigator, who provided all the images that are available in NMDID. And thank you also for your time and attention while I spoke about this project.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Egger, for a fantastic and informative presentation. We now have a couple of minutes for some Q&A, and I've got some questions coming in now. The first one I have at the top of my list is, how is admixture indicated, and is it possible to search individuals according to admixture?
I hope everybody can hear me. That's it's an interesting question. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by admixture in this circumstance. If you mean genetic admixture, we do not have any genetic information at all for individuals in this project. So there's no way to search for admixture that's genetic admixture because we don't have that information. If you're interested in like social concepts of belonging, race, ethnicity, and group membership, that's searchable. The race categories are those that are used in the census. Ethnicity is also, well, it looked like the census of 2020 was going to be asking about both whether someone was Hispanic or whether someone was Middle Eastern or whether someone was none of those things. And so that's how we designed our ethnicity question. In the end, the 2020 census didn't ask the Middle Eastern question, but we already had collected that data. And then finally, under the third category, then there's the tribal membership. And then finally, for people who are New Mexicans of Spanish-speaking descent, we asked a further question about how they might categorize themselves based on some prior research that I and a team of researchers have conducted here in New Mexico. And so we provide that information. But as far as I said, genetic information, we can't search for it because we don't have that information.
Next question I have here is, are the scout images categorized by region of the body?
Well, they're kind of standardized by how we took them. You can read our CT taking protocol, which involves usually a head and neck and thorax scan, and then a lower extremity scan. And then also those scans are provided when you do download the scans. They come in a variety of different ways, like thin sections, thicker sections, views that are the algorithms are designed to emphasize bone or soft tissue, lung specifically, those kinds of things. The scouts are, we haven't categorized them in any particular way, but each person has probably on average 4 to 6 scouts, and you can just click on them. But they're really just there to help you get an initial look at the person, and we don't really expect anybody to be doing research on scouts. You can if you want, but I don't have a form of how the scouts are categorized.
If you submit a research request for a group of scans and then decide to expand the analysis on that same group, do you need to submit an additional request, assuming that the same individual is doing the research and the project is related?
You actually do need to submit an additional request for those individuals. You can say in that request, this is building on research that I've already done. Lots of researchers have already done that, where they've downloaded like 100 individuals and then said, okay, well, I still need 40 more or something like that. So yes, the answer is yes, you need to submit an additional request because you need to refill your cart and empty it that way. It's kind of just like shopping for, you've already bought spaghetti sauce, but now you need some more spaghetti sauce. So you have to additionally request it. But you can, in your research request, just say, this is, I would ask that you repeat your research request, but also say, this is just more of the same thing that I've asked for before. And that's really helpful for us.
Next question I have here is what portion of the metadata fields came automatically from the autopsy reports compared to manually entered?
Wow, that's a really good question that I can't answer well, because every individual, all 15,243, has some information that came automatically from the autopsy reports. Those would be very basic pieces of information. And then for about 5,000 people, only the information that came automatically is in the database, and mostly because we ran out of time in the project to get to everyone. But then for about 10,000 people, what we did was our students who were calling next of kin also reviewed every detail of the case and added additional information. Basically what they would do is call somebody, get information, and add whatever else they could get, or if they called and let's say the number was disconnected or something like that, they would simply review it. So what I can say is this: for 2/3 of the information, for 2/3 of the individuals, they have information that comes from the automatic data searching and information from our students who kind of, I guess you can say hand gathered the data, but every individual has some data that was automatic. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but I hope so.
next question I have here is, and I apologize if I'm not saying this terminology correctly, but is the MA and KVP noted for each CT scan?
Yeah, there's information in the DICOMs. We did not remove that information, so that standard information is there. And also the CT protocol is listed on the website.
Let's see, next one I have here. You mentioned that we can only request 500 images at a time, but can we submit one larger or multiple additional requests to increase our sample sizes if necessary?
You can, and I just got this request from a researcher the other day. Yeah, we kind of figure that 500 will work for most people, but if it doesn't, you can request additional images. I would like in that research request, I think the team who reviews it would like, if you would specifically say why 500 is not enough and why you need additional images. But we are not at all opposed to providing more information.
What is the thinnest section obtained to look at pediatric bone?
Let's see. So again, the CT protocol is available on the website, and it provides both the adult and pediatric standards. I believe the thinnest section is a 0.5 millimeter with no, I'm sorry. I believe the thinnest section is 1 millimeter with 0.5 millimeter overlap. But please, I am not an expert in CT scanning protocols, so I would suggest you check the protocol that's there, which was written by a real expert.
I've got a follow-up actually to the additional request question from earlier. Do you need to submit a new research question to conduct a slightly different analysis on the same group of scans if you do not need any additional individuals?
So, no, the answer is no. As long as it's the same researcher using the same scans, it's fine. What you can't really do, and this is explained in the data use agreement, is you can't share your images that you've downloaded with someone who has not been approved for different research.
Last question I have here is what kind of image requests are approvable? And I think what they mean is like if somebody wanted to use images for teaching use as opposed to research.
Yeah, so we had expected that most of our research, or most of the requests we would get would be for research with a small subset for teaching. But in the time of COVID-19, we have absolutely been inundated with teaching requests and been happy to make them work for people. So there's some limitations on how you can share the images. You can use them in a class, and you can show any image you want to a class for demonstration purposes, and you can provide measurements and those kinds of things. We ask that you don't just distribute raw CTs to an entire class, basically because it's that's a lot of free use. Who knows what will happen from there? But we are more than happy to provide teaching resources using this resource.
Actually, I got one more question here. This is more kind of trying to get your anecdotal experience, but typically this person's asking, would they need an IRB application at their home institution prior to undertaking any research on the data? Have you run into any experience with that with people requesting information or the data?
Some, at least one person I know, I don't know if they were required to go through their IRB, but they asked me a bunch of questions because they were going through their IRB. But it's a really bad idea for me to hypothesize about what other people's IRBs will want. And it's an easy thing to reach out to them. For example, the UNM IRB has a standardized checklist where you can use their checklist to decide whether something is human subjects research before you proceed. But just because UNM has what's on their checkbook. There's no standardization across IRBs. And so if you have a concern, I suggest that you reach out to your own IRB and check with them.
Perfect. Well, I think that is all the time we have for today. So I want to thank Dr. Egger for taking the time out of your day to present the material for today's webinar. And I want to thank all the attendees for joining us today. These webinars would not be possible without your attendance and support. But again, Dr. Egger, thank you. It was a fantastic presentation. I think a lot of people learned some great stuff, and we really appreciate you being on to give that information.
It's my pleasure. Thank you all for attending, and I hope you found it helpful.
Thank you so much. So for you audience members out there, before you leave today's webinar, we would like to ask you to participate in a short survey. You'll see the word survey directly below the closed caption pod on the right-hand side. Simply click the word survey, and that will bring up our customer satisfactory survey for today's event. Your feedback about our webinars is vital information that we use to provide you the best webinar experience and adjust the content and the way we disseminate the information to our audience. So if you could please take a few moments to complete that survey, we'd greatly appreciate it. Again, I want to thank everybody for attending today, and we hope you found today's webinar extremely useful and informative. Last thing, you'll see that my coworker, Tyler, is placing links to all our social media outlets, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter, as well as our website, forensiccoe.org, and a link to our podcast episodes. Make sure you are following us on all your outlets to stay up to date with everything that FTCOE is doing in the forensic community. We are constantly adding new content to our website in the form of webinars, news reports, and success stories. Thank you again for attending, and we hope everybody has a great rest of your day.